The pen felt heavier than anything Jolene had ever held in her life, and she had held dying patients' hands in the ICU without flinching. But this narrow conference room on the 38th floor of a Bay Street tower, the Toronto skyline bleeding orange through the windows behind her husband's silhouette, this was the thing that finally made her hands shake. Damien Cartwright didn't sit. He stood with his arms crossed, his jaw set in that expression she used to mistake for strength, but now recognized as cruelty dressed in a good suit. His lawyer had already spread the papers across the mahogany table, like a dealer laying out a losing hand. "Just sign it, Jolene." Damien's voice was flat, no anger, no sadness, nothing. "We both know this stopped working a long time ago." She stared at the black ink of the signature line. Her throat burned. She had found out she was pregnant that morning. Sat on the cold tile of the bathroom floor at 4 a.m., watching 2 lines darken on a test she'd taken 3 times because she couldn't believe it. After the miscarriage last year. After Damien told her she was not built for motherhood, the way some people aren't built for marathons. After the fertility specialist warned her about her elevated cortisol and the chances dropping every month she stayed under this kind of stress. She hadn't told him. She wasn't going to. Not now. Not with the way he was looking at her, through her, like she was an item on a checklist he was finally crossing off. "Your lawyer can send any questions to mine," Damien said, already checking his phone. A notification lit the screen. Jolene caught the name before he tilted it away. Tessa. A little heart emoji beside it. Her chest caved in. The way a building implodes, all the damage inside, the exterior still standing for one impossible second. She signed. Damien collected the papers without a word, slid them into a leather portfolio and walked out. No goodbye. The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft chime, and Jolene sat alone in the conference room, listening to the hum of the ventilation system and the faint honking of traffic 40 floors below, and she pressed both palms flat against the table to stop the room from spinning. She made it to the underground parking garage before her body gave out. She crumpled against the concrete wall beside her old Civic, knees buckling, a sound tearing from her throat that she didn't recognize as her own. Her hand flew to her stomach. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please, I can't lose you too." Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. "Don't call me. Forward any mail to the office," as if she were a subscription he'd canceled. She drove home, the studio apartment she'd moved into 3 weeks ago when he told her to leave the Rosedale house, and sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark, still wearing her coat, still holding her car keys, crying until her ribs ached. She thought this was the lowest point. She had no idea it was only the beginning. No idea how far Damien and Tessa Langford's betrayal would reach. No idea who was about to walk into her life. And no idea that the tiny flutter inside her belly was not 1 heartbeat, but 2. Toronto became unbearable overnight. Every corner of the city held a ghost. The restaurant on King West where Damien proposed. The cafe on Queen where she used to wait for him after board meetings. The hospital where she worked double shifts while he built Cartwright BioVentures into a company worth 9 figures. She couldn't walk into the break room at Toronto General without someone asking, in that pitiful half-whisper, "How are you holding up?" She wasn't holding up. She was drowning in slow motion and smiling about it. So when the transfer request to Vancouver General came through, a position in maternal fetal medicine, of all things, she didn't hesitate. She packed 2 suitcases, shipped 3 boxes, and booked a one-way flight out of Pearson on a Tuesday morning, so gray it looked like the sky itself was mourning. Vancouver greeted her with rain. Not the angry, dramatic kind, but the soft, persistent kind that sinks into your bones and stays. She found a basement suite in Kitsilano, a few blocks from the beach, with a radiator that clanked at night and a kitchen window that looked out onto someone's overgrown garden. It wasn't beautiful. It was hers. She started working. She started sleeping, most nights. She stopped Googling Damien's name. She walked the seawall on her days off, wrapped in the oversized cardigan her grandmother had knitted. The one thing she'd carried from Lagos to Ottawa to every apartment she'd ever lived in. Some mornings she pressed her hand against her belly and whispered things she'd never say out loud. Promises about safety, about love, about never letting anyone make these babies feel like they weren't enough. She had no one to call. Her parents had passed. Her mother to cancer when Jolene was 19, her father to a stroke 3 years later. no siblings. She had come to Canada as a teenager, brilliant and quiet and determined, won a full scholarship to McMaster, graduated top of her nursing cohort, married a man who made her believe she had finally built something permanent. Now the permanence was gone, and all she had was herself, and two fetuses the size of kidney beans who didn't know yet how precarious the world was. It was on a Saturday in Stanley Park that her life tilted. She sat on a bench near the totem poles, face raw from wind and tears she thought she'd run out of, watching a little girl chase pigeons on the path. She didn't notice the man at first. Tall, dark coat. Standing a few meters away with a coffee he wasn't really drinking, watching the water with the quiet focus of someone whose mind was somewhere else entirely. He noticed her. Not in the way men usually did, not appraising, not curious. He saw something. The red eyes, the stiff shoulders, the way her hand rested protectively over her midsection. His gaze lingered for a moment, not with pity, but recognition. Then he looked away, and the moment passed. Jolene didn't know his name yet. She didn't know that Solomon Riviere was one of the wealthiest men in British Columbia, that his private equity firm held controlling stakes in half the clean energy sector on the West Coast, that he had quietly donated more to women's shelters in Vancouver than most companies earned in a fiscal quarter. She didn't know that he recognized the look on her face because he had worn it himself once, years ago, in a hospital hallway where he lost his wife to a brain aneurysm and became a widower at 34. All she knew was that a stranger had looked at her and not looked away. While Jolene was slowly relearning how to breathe in Vancouver, Damien Cartwright was making sure the entire country knew he'd moved on. The engagement photos dropped on a Friday. Every major outlet ran them. Damien in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, Tessa Langford draped against him in Versace, the two of them backlit on a yacht in the Muskokas. The ring was obscene. The caption was worse. BioVentures CEO Damien Cartwright confirms engagement to model Tessa Langford. "She's my future," says Cartwright. Jolene saw it at the hospital, on a break, scrolling her phone while eating a granola bar in the supply closet. The granola bar hit the floor. Her vision tunneled. She read the headline 3 times, then 4, as if repetition might change the words. Engaged. He was engaged. 3 months after tossing her out of his life like expired milk. She found the video next. An interviewer asked Tessa about the previous marriage. Tessa laughed, a careful, performative sound, and said, "People outgrow each other. It's natural." Damien stood beside her, arm tight around her waist, and said nothing. Didn't correct her. Didn't flinch. Didn't show one flicker of the guilt Jolene had spent months hoping existed somewhere inside him. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She opened the message with numb fingers. A photo. Damien at the engagement party, toasting with champagne, wearing the cufflinks Jolene had given him for their first anniversary. Sterling silver, custom engraved with the coordinates of the church where they'd married. He had told her he lost them during a business trip to Calgary. He hadn't lost them. He'd saved them for a bigger audience. Something cracked inside her. Not broke, cracked the way ice cracks before it shifts. The grief didn't disappear. It sharpened. It turned cold. It turned into something she could stand on. And then someone knocked on her apartment door. The knock was soft, tentative. She was sitting on the kitchen floor between a spilled bag of rice and her own tears, and she wasn't in any state to see anyone. But the knock came again, slightly firmer. "Jolene?" A man's voice, calm, steady, familiar only in the way a melody you've heard once stays lodged in your memory. "It's Solomon Riviere. We crossed paths in the park. I saw the news. I wanted to make sure you were all right." Her breath caught. She remembered him, the man who looked at her and didn't look away. She opened the door a crack. He stood in the hallway, rain-dampened coat, holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street. His expression wasn't pity. It was concern, respectful, unhurried, offering nothing she hadn't asked for. "I'm not great company right now," she said, voice ragged. "That's fine," he said. "I brought scones." Despite everything, a sound escaped her that was almost a laugh. She stepped back and let him in. He didn't comment on the mess. He didn't scan the apartment with the judgment she expected from a man who probably owned the building. He picked up the bag of rice from the floor, set it on the counter, and put the kettle on as if this were the most normal house call in the world. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm doing it." They sat at her tiny table drinking tea from mismatched mugs, and Solomon didn't push. He talked about the rain, about a book he was reading, about the way the harbor looked at dawn when the fog burned off. And slowly, without her planning it, Jolene started talking too. Not about Damien, not about the pregnancy, but about the way the city felt different when you were alone in it. How silence changed shape depending on whether you chose it or it chose you. When he left an hour later, the apartment felt different. Not fixed, just lighter. As if someone had opened a window she didn't know was painted shut. Over the next weeks, Solomon appeared in her life the way the tide comes in. Gradually, reliably, never forced. He brought soup when she mentioned nausea. He texted her articles about parks she might like. He walked beside her on the seawall without needing conversation. He never pushed, he never presumed. And when she finally told him she was pregnant, standing in the kitchen one evening, hands shaking, braced for the reaction that would send him running, he simply said, "I know." "You hold your stomach when you think nobody's watching. You're not scared off?" she asked. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. Those words settled into her bones like warmth she'd forgotten existed. She told him everything then. The miscarriage, the fertility struggles, Damien's gaslighting, the rushed divorce. And then the thing that changed everything. A phone call from Priya Sandhu, the family lawyer who'd handled the divorce. Priya called on a Thursday night, breathless. "Jolene, I need you to sit down." "I'm already sitting." "Good." "I was reviewing the divorce file for a professional seminar and I found something." Damien's legal team was sloppy. In the rush to push the papers through, his assistant bundled a mirror document into the signing packet, a standard child support and custody framework that his side was supposed to review and sign separately. Instead, it got clipped into the main agreement. Jolene's pulse quickened. What does that mean? It means Damien signed a clause, voluntarily, legally witnessed, that forfeits all parental rights to any child conceived before the divorce date. The room went silent except for the radiator clanking. "Jolene, are you still there?" "He has no rights?" she whispered. "Nah. Custodial, financial, visitation, nothing. He forfeited everything the moment he forced those papers through. And because his team initiated the agreement and he signed it in the presence of a notary, it's ironclad. No court in this country would overturn it." Jolene pressed a hand to her mouth. Her babies, safe. Legally, permanently, irrevocably safe from a man who never wanted them. "He doesn't know," Jolene said softly. "No," Priya confirmed. "And when he finds out, he'll try everything. But it won't matter. He signed his own fate." When the call ended, Jolene sat motionless for a long time. The twins kicked gently, as if reminding her they were there, alive, growing hers. A knock came at the door. Solomon, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate, froze when he saw her face. "What happened?" he asked. She looked at him with eyes that were no longer afraid. "Everything just changed." The twins came early. A cold November morning, the mountains still invisible behind low clouds, and Jolene woke with a pressure that turned into pain, that turned into certainty. She called Solomon. He answered on the first ring and said only, "I'm coming." He carried her to the car with a steadiness that belied the fear she could see tightening the corners of his eyes. The drive to Vancouver General was a blur of controlled breathing and Solomon's voice, calm and grounding beside her. "You're doing this. I'm right here. You're not alone." The delivery was chaotic. Nurses moving fast, monitors beeping, doctors using words like premature and high risk, and neonatal team standing by. Jolene gripped Solomon's hand so hard her knuckles whitened, and he didn't flinch. The first cry came just after noon, thin and sharp and fierce. A girl. They placed her on Jolene's chest for one brief, shattering moment before the neonatal nurses whisked her away. Jolene sobbed, reaching after her, and Solomon leaned close and murmured, "She's strong. She's a fighter." 4 minutes later, the second cry. A boy. Jolene laughed and wept at the same time, overwhelmed by a love so sudden and so enormous it felt like her chest couldn't contain it. 2 miracles. 2 impossible, stubborn, beautiful miracles. "You did it," Solomon whispered, his voice thick. "Jolene, you did it." She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask. And for the first time in years, she felt whole. The news broke before the twins were 12 hours old. A hospital visitor snapped a photo. Solomon carrying Jolene through the corridor, her head against his shoulder, the neonatal bassinets visible behind them. The photo went viral within hours. Billionaire Solomon Riviere seen at Vancouver General with mystery woman. Twins confirmed. The headlines didn't bother Jolene. What bothered her was knowing that 3,000 kilometers away, Damien Cartwright was watching. He saw the photos mid-meeting. The room full of board members and investors went quiet as phones buzzed in sequence, and Chairman Everly slid his tablet across the table. Damien looked down and the blood drained from his face. Twins. Jolene. Solomon Riviere. The one man in Canadian business who could crush him with a phone call. Those could be mine, Damien whispered, staring at the photo of the baby boy. The jawline, the brow, unmistakable. Tessa, who had followed him to the office that morning, in a white blazer and heels, leaned over his shoulder. Her face went rigid. You told me she couldn't get pregnant. She couldn't. The doctor said he stopped. Because he remembered. The specialist's warning. The follow-up. The window of fertility he'd ignored, because acknowledging it would have meant acknowledging that Jolene still mattered. I'm going to Vancouver, he said. Tessa grabbed his arm. Damien, think about what you're doing. He shook her off and walked out. He arrived in Vancouver in the rain, because Vancouver always gives you rain when you're about to do something foolish. He found the hospital. He found the neonatal ward. He found the hallway. And standing in front of the door, arms folded, expression as calm and immovable as stone, was Solomon Riviere. Damien stopped. His chest heaved. His suit was wrinkled from the flight. He looked nothing like the man on the yacht. Move, he said. Solomon didn't move. Those are my children, Damien hissed. No, Solomon said quietly. They're not. You don't get to decide that. Solomon reached into his coat and produced a manila envelope. Before you make this worse for yourself. Damien ripped it open. His hands trembled as he read. The forfeiture clause, his signature, his initials, notarized, filed, binding under the Family Law Act. No, he whispered. No, this isn't. I didn't mean to. You didn't read what you signed, Solomon said. You were in such a hurry to discard your wife that you discarded your rights along with her. Damien's face contorted. She tricked me. She didn't trick you. She was crying in a parking garage while you texted your girlfriend. Your own carelessness did this. I'll fight it. I'll take this to the Supreme Court if I have to. Solomon stepped closer, his voice dropping to something low and final. You will lose. Every signature is yours. Every timestamp is documented. Every lie you told. About the fertility, about the cufflinks, about the marriage. It all leads back to you. He paused. And if you come near her or those children again, I will make sure you lose far more than a custody case you never had standing for. For the first time in his life, Damien Cartwright had nothing to say. He stood in that hospital hallway, soaked and shaking, watching the door close between him and the family he'd thrown away. Then he turned and walked back into the rain. Back in Toronto, the empire crumbled fast. The board of Cartwright BioVentures had been circling for weeks. The engagement embarrassment, the leaked photos, rumors of financial irregularities. Someone inside the company had been rerouting research funds to a shell corporation, using Damien's credentials. He swore he hadn't authorized it. The timestamp said otherwise. You're asking us to believe, Chairman Everly said in the emergency board meeting, that someone hacked your personal login, forged your digital signature, and funneled $3 million without your knowledge. Because that's what happened, Damien shouted. Then who? Everly asked. Who had that access? Silence. The vote was unanimous. Suspended pending investigation. Damien watched each raised hand like a nail in a coffin, and when he reached for his phone afterward, the message from Tessa was already there. We're done. Don't contact me. Everything he'd built, the company, the fiancé, the reputation, gone. And the person who destroyed it all wasn't Jolene, wasn't Solomon, wasn't even the board. It was the man in the mirror who thought cruelty had no consequences. The press conference was Jolene's idea, though Priya and Solomon both offered to handle it for her. She said no. I need to do this myself. She stood in a small, secure room at the law firm's Vancouver office. The twins sleeping in carriers beside her, Solomon a steady presence at her shoulder, a handful of selected journalists. No chaos, just truth. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I never wanted to be a headline. I wanted a marriage that lasted. I wanted children I could raise in peace. When my ex-husband chose to end our marriage, I respected that decision, even though it nearly broke me. I moved across the country. I rebuilt my life alone. I gave birth to 2 beautiful, healthy babies, and I did it without asking him for anything." She paused. The room was perfectly still. "Today, I am confirming that the legal record speaks for itself. My children are mine. They are safe. And they will grow up knowing that strength doesn't come from power or money. It comes from choosing love, even when the world tells you you're not enough." Priya stepped forward. "The forfeiture clause signed by Mr. Cartwright is final and irrevocable under the Family Law Act of British Columbia. Additionally, evidence of financial misconduct within Cartwright Bioventures has been submitted to the appropriate regulatory authorities. No further comment will be made at this time." Across the country, Damien watched the live stream from a rented condo he couldn't really afford anymore, and for the first time understood that this wasn't revenge. This was consequence, and consequence doesn't negotiate. That evening, the penthouse was quiet. The twins slept in matching bassinets by the window, the harbor lights glittering beyond the glass like a city holding its breath. Jolene sat on the sofa, exhaustion pressed into every muscle, but something in her chest felt open, spacious, like a room that had been locked for years and finally had its door thrown wide. Solomon sat beside her, close enough to feel, far enough to respect. "You changed something today," he said. "I just told the truth." He looked at her for a long moment. "Jolene, you deserve more than survival. You deserve joy. You deserve mornings where the first thing you feel isn't dread. You deserve someone who stays, not because they need you, but because they choose you." Her eyes stung. "And whenever you're ready for that," he added softly, "I'm here. No rush, no pressure. Just here." She didn't say anything for a while. She watched the lights on the water and listened to the tiny breaths of her children and felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, the absence of fear. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder, and he rested his cheek against her hair, and the city glowed on. Jolene Achebe had walked into a conference room on Bay Street with nothing but a pen and a broken heart. She walked out of a law firm in Vancouver with 2 children, a truth the world couldn't ignore, and a man who had never once asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. The Stoics say that the obstacle is the way, that every wound can become a door. Jolene didn't set out to prove them right. She just refused to disappear. And in refusing, she became the kind of woman no one could ever discard again. So if you're listening to this, and something in Jolene's journey touched a nerve, if you've been told you're not enough, if you've rebuilt your life from a floor you thought you'd never get up from, if you're still in the middle of the storm and you can't see the other side, remember this: the same heart that breaks is the same heart that heals. And healing isn't forgetting. It's becoming someone even you didn't know you could be. If this story meant something to you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to Mr. Sebastian Stories so we can walk through the next one together. You're not alone. You never were.